Okay, we're going to have a little look at how we make our pockets. You can put as many or as few pockets on the outside of your press bag as you want. Three, you can easily fit 3 on either side, so you could have a grand total of 6, or you could just put 3 on one side, or you could just put none. It really depends on what you want. It's very much your bag to customise the way you want it. For each pocket you're going to need 2 of the flat pieces, so there'll be an exterior flat piece and a lining flat piece. My fabrics, I'm using the same for both, but they're both exactly the same. Both will have been interfaced with a woven fusible interfacing. You're going to need an exterior pocket panel and a lining pocket panel. Again, they're exactly the same size. I'm using 2 different fabrics for this. You're also going to need cam snaps. Now, if you haven't got cam snaps, don't worry. You can use an ordinary sew-on snap, or popper, as we call them in the UK. You could even use a little tiny spot of Velcro if that were easier. So you're going to need a set of cam snaps. So that's 2 of the pointy pieces, and then a male and female piece to go on the inside. So we're going to start with our, and I've just lost one of my cam snap pieces, so I may have to scrub it around on the floor. No, I might have to just get another one out. So we're going to take our 2 flat pieces, and we are going to join them, place them together, right sides together, matching up the sides, and we're going to sew all the way around, but not along the top edge. And we're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to back stitch a couple of stitches at the beginning just to secure my stitching. Being careful as you come around those curves to make sure that your curves are nice and curved and not sort of jagged. Take it slowly, these will be visible, so it's nice to make sure that they look smart. Remove any stray threads. Now you can either use a pair of pinking shears if you've got them, or if you haven't, then just an ordinary pair of scissors, just to cut little triangles into the curves, just to clip into the curves to make sure that when we turn this, our curves sit nicely and smoothly. So basically we're taking the bulk out of the curve. Be careful you don't cut into your stitching. If you do, you can just stitch over it, but it's ideally you don't really want to. And I've got lots of nice little triangular pieces. So you can see I've just trimmed out just around the curves. I'm just going to remove a little bit of the seam allowance. I'm probably reducing it by probably about a third. So I'm not taking it right down to an eighth of an inch. I don't want it to be too small, but I'm just taking it out just to get some of the bulk out. I'm going to turn it right side out. Pushing it out with my fingers. I'm just going to use a turning tool to make sure that my curves are properly out. And I'm going to grab my pressing mat, because you want to give this a really good press to make sure that it's nice and flat. Go out of the way, and then I'm going to top stitch all the way around, but not across that top open edge. And I'm top stitching at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, so I'm increasing my stitch length a little. I'm just doing one back stitch at the beginning just to secure my stitching. slowly as you go around the curves to make sure that you stay on your 1/8 of an inch line. If an 1/8 of an inch is too little of a seam allowance for you for top stitching, 1/8 of an inch is fine. I just think 1/8 of an inch looks nice, it looks really smart. Remove any stray threads. And there's your flap completed. And I'm just going to grab another piece of cam snap rubber. There we go. And I have my cam snap pliers and an awl. Now, the first thing I need to do is to mark my let's grab my ruler. Is to mark my flap where I want to put my cam snap. So I'm going to just fold it in half across the width, which gives me a sort of central line, and I can, if I finger press it, I can just kind of get a mark where that is. Then I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm just using a pin, but I'm just going to pop a pin in 1/2 an inch away from, so I think you can probably see that it's 1/2 an inch away from this curved edge in the center. And I'm going to use that pinhole that I created with my awl. I'm just going to put the pin out of the, and get hold of it. Pin out of the way. So I stuck my awl through the fabric, and I'm just giving it a little jiggle so that it makes a proper hole. From the right side of the flap, and it's difficult to tell because obviously I'm using the same fabric on both sides, pop one of your pins through. So this is one of the pieces that looks a bit like a little safety pin or a thumbtack, I think they call them in America. Pop it through so that you've got the bowl on the outside, so the circle part is on the outside, and on the inside you have the little pointed bit coming through. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you use the male or the female on the other side. I prefer to use the female on the flap. It's very much up to you. It makes no difference to the final thing. So I'm popping the female side on the back so that the little pin comes through the middle. And you can see that that pin is there poking out. So this is not secure, but the pin is there poking through the center of the female part. We use our tool, our pliers. Now, if you've got a big green press, then you'll be using, you could and you've got the dies for cam snaps, so you could use that. But I like to use this because I just find using the the press for it just a fiddle arse, simply because you've got so many different cams, so many different dies to put in. It's a lot quicker just to use the smaller pliers, and I don't have an issue with my hands doing that. So the little bowl at the bottom, you need to pop the dome side of the drawing pin part into, and you can see that I've actually kind of got hold of that. Even though I'm not pressing it, if I let go, that'll all just fall to pieces. Just get hold of it so that I can actually make sure that everything is lined up. Once I know it's all lined up, I give it a squeeze. That compresses that little pointed bit in the middle, and that's what secures the cam snap in place. So there's the flap completed. I can put that out of the way. The other half of my cam snap we're not going to put on just yet. We have quite a while before we get to that point. So I'm going to take my exterior, and this is my exterior fabric, and I'm going to take that piece. And what I'm going to do is, you can see where we've got these cutouts at the bottom. I'm going to fold one side down so that the two lines of that cutter, two sides of that cutout, are sitting right next to each other, so you can kind of see how that looks. So the two, you can see that they're together. I'm going to stitch those together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. What we're doing is we're effectively boxing the corners going to do that on all 4 of the corners. So the corners on this piece. So I'm going to do the other side. So you can see that's nicely boxed. I'm just going to bring that one up. Same thing again. Doing 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Remove any stray threads. And we're going to do exactly the same on our lining panel. There's quite a lot of repetition goes on with this one. And if you're going to have, I'm just going to show you with 1 pocket, but if you're putting 6 on, you're going to have to repeat this 6 times. Same thing again. So what we end up with is more threads. It's a pocket. Look, it looks like a pocket. It looks like a 3D pocket. I'm going to trim off the seam allowance down by about half because I just want to get rid of the bulk that we'll have in the bottom corners of our pocket. And I'm doing that on both of the exterior and the lining panels. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that's my exterior. I wanted to stand up, it's not going to though. Nope, it's not going to stand up. I'm going to push my lining so that it's actually poking outwards, so the curve of the lining is sort of towards inside. And I'm going to pop one inside of the other, so they're right sides together. I'm matching up those corner seams. Now what I'm going to do with those corner seams is, because I've cut them quite short, I'm going to offset them. So rather than opening them up as we would normally do, I'm pushing them from the lining parts are going to go one side and the exterior parts are going to go the other side, which is a sort of a butting up technique that's used in quilting. It allows you to get quite a nice seam and allows those 2 different seams to butt up against each other. So I'm doing the same on both sides. On both of those bottom seams, I'm pushing, so the lining will go one way and the exterior will go the other, and they're butted right up against each other. And I'm just clipping them in place. You should find that everything else just clips nicely together. Should all fit perfectly. Just going to grab some more clips though. So I seem to be running out here. I've got all sorts of other things in my clip pot which doesn't help me get hold of them. So take the top corners and match those also. If you want really nicely fitted little pockets, then you do need to take a little bit of time doing this. Just matching everything up and making sure that it's all nice and level. Okay, now I think without even going any further, you can see that we've got a sort of a pocket shape, albeit inside out, and you can probably figure out that this long straight edge is the top edge of your pocket. So on the top edge of your pocket, we are going to stitch all the way around the outside. However, we are going to leave a gap that's approximately 2.5 to 3 inches along the top here. So if I remove that, you can see that I've, between my fingers there's a reasonable size gap, and I'm going to stitch all the way around the outside and back up, but leaving that gap unstitched. So I'm going to go and do that now. And that gap's being left for a reason, so that we can turn our pocket around the right way. Make sure when you get to the corners at the top of your pockets that you pivot nice and tidily. Again, we're sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. a couple of back stitches at the beginning to secure my stitching. Pivot at that corner. Come down towards those joined seams at the bottom corners, making sure that you keep those seams that you've cut right down the seam allowance butted up together, so that the lining corners and the exterior corners stay together. Continue all the way around the outside. There we go, and we've gone all the way around. So I've started here, gone all the way around, and then finished up here. Difficult to see because I've actually got light coloured thread, but nonetheless, you'll have to take my word for it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to trim off these corners on the top corners down to 45 degrees. And I'll take out a little bit extra as well, just to make sure that there's no bulk left in those corners. So you can see there that I've got a, a furry friend has just come to join me. So I'm just going to, oh no, it's going out the window. So I've taken out the, excuse me, Pussycat, you need to go outside. You are not a film star. Come on, where you go? So I've taken the bulk out of those corners. I'm now going to open up that gap that we left on the top straight edge, and I'm going to turn my pocket through. I think he's gone now. You will need some sort of a pokey tool of some sort to push out all of the corners in this. Remember, your lining is going to sit inside of your exterior fabric, so they're going to be sort of flat together inside. Use a pokey tool to push out the corners. Be careful you don't push them out too far. You don't want to explode the corners. That does happen sometimes, especially if you use sharp scissors to do your turning. So use your fingers to kind of roll the seam between the two panels, the lining and the front panel. Your corners where your seams are should match perfectly, and they shouldn't be too thick because you've offset those seam allowances. So once I've got those lined up, I like to put just a few clips just to hold it in place so that I know what I'm doing. And you can kind of see that it's turning into a pocket now. It's actually a 3D pocket. Now along this top edge, we're just going to turn in that seam allowance where we left our turning gap. If you want to get the iron out and press it, then you can do. I generally just finger press it, and I'll just clip it in place so that both of the raw edges of the fabric are turned inside. And then I'm going to top stitch along this top straight edge, which will close that gap. Again, top stitching about an 1/8 of an inch, which will hold the seam allowance in place. And this will close that turning gap where you turned your pocket. So now you can see we have a pocket, a little 3D pocket. Now just to make sure that what we end up with is actually a nice little rectangular pocket, we're going to do a little bit of pressing at this point. So I'm going to remove those clips that I put along the bottom, and I am actually going to press that the bottom of that seam and the sides, just to make sure that the lining and the exterior are on the outside and the inside. So that's press that seam. I don't need those clips there anymore. And what I'm going to do next is, with my pocket laying down on the table so that it's like a bowl, is this bottom edge, I'm going to fold that up so that basically I get a line between the two corners, and I'm going to press that flat, which will give me a much nicer, squarer bottom on my pocket. And having done that, I'm then going to do exactly the same with the sides. So I'm going to push the sides in and press. If you find it easier to do this by pressing and then clipping to hold it in place, you can do. I just like to have a sort of a fairly sharp looking boxed corner. So now let's just, if I hold that up, you can kind of see that what we've got is a nice sharp little box. The corners are nice and smart. Once that's actually attached to our bag, it will form a nice little box. And with our box, we have a little flap. So we end up with a little pocket that looks a bit like that. Now I'll show you how to attach that, but we're going to have a little look at straps first. So these are your pockets. If you go on and make as many pockets as you want to make for your bag, and that can be, well, it can be none up to 6 you can fit on. If you wanted to put 6, that's fine, but you need to make 6. So that's your pockets. That's one pocket I've made. That's one pocket and one flap, and you'll need to repeat that for as many times as you actually want to put pockets. You don't need to put the other half of the cam snap on just yet. We'll do that once the pockets are actually installed, so that you can put them in exactly the right place. A lot easier than messing about trying to do it now and then lining things up. So that's your pockets. And we'll go on to straps next.